And I think once people start relying on their trading income, it places a huge amount of pressure on you. You know, some of these guys that I know that have unfortunately been unable to get on with their trading lives, they've had to revert to different things now. Literally, they can't be employed in any professional business. They've got to drive Uber. They've got to pump petrol at the local BP service station or whatever it is. And it's not a position you want to be in when you're 50, you know, or anything like that. So I think you've just got to use a little bit of common sense.
Welcome to Better System Trader, the podcast to help systematic traders of all levels improve their trading. We'll give you loads of expert tips and practical advice on system design and validation, money management, trading psychology, and many other topics. Whether you're just starting out or a savvy systematic trader, we're here to help you improve your trading and find more success. This is Better System Trader with your host, Andrew Swanscott.
Hi there and welcome to the Better System Trader podcast. Today we're going to be discussing a topic that is close to the hearts and minds of many traders, and that is the subject of trading for a living. When I first started getting into trading, I had this grand vision in my mind of leaving my corporate job, traveling the world, living a life of luxury, all supported by my massive trading profits. Getting to that stage though is really tough, but trading for a living is a goal for lots of traders, and I regularly receive emails from people asking questions like, how do I know when I'm ready to trade for a living? How do I become a full-time trader? How much money do I need? What other factors do I need to consider before taking this step? Now, the guest for this episode is Nick Radge from The Chartist, and he's got an extensive trading history and also mentors other traders. So he's in a really great position to answer all of our questions on trading for a living. So that's what he's going to do for us today. Plus, he's also going to share some honest advice that all traders need to hear before taking that step to be trading for a living. So let's jump over to the conversation with Nick. Hi, Nick. Welcome back to the show. It's really great to have you here once again.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. Great to be here again.
Yeah, the last time we spoke on this podcast was, I think it was just over 2 years ago. You're actually the fourth guest that I ever interviewed, and I took a little bit of a listen to that interview before our chat today, and I was pretty rough. So let's hope I'm a little bit smoother this time with my questioning, okay?
Practice makes perfect.
Yeah, exactly. But before we get started, how about, can you just share a little bit of your background with us, like how you got into trading and what you're doing now?
Sure. So I started trading straight out of high school. 1985 I started. I was trading the share price index futures using a 5-day and 10-day moving average crossover. That was it. I was doing it manually on chart paper. I managed to survive for the first year or so doing that. Had no idea about money management or position sizing or anything like that. Then 1987 came along, and I got absolutely blown up. I was very leveraged doing other stuff, trading equities. My father had to bail me out and had to go and get a few extra jobs to pay him back over the next few years. So I learned the lessons the hard way, I think, as everybody does. But now today I'm a fully systematic trader. I trade 5 different 100% systematic strategies across Australia and US equities. 2 of those are trend following strategies. 2 are short-term mean reversion strategies, and 1's a day trading strategy. And I do a lot of mentoring now as well, teaching people how to design, build, and implement their own systematic trading styles. And that's a pretty good mentorship program that goes for 6 months, and we attract a lot of very serious traders around the world. So getting good experience from, knowing what people do and how they do it and that kind of stuff.
All right, cool. Well, thanks for that background, Nick. Now, the reason that I've asked you to join us today is to have a chat about trading for a living, because I regularly receive emails from people asking questions like, how do I know I'm ready? How do I become a full-time trader? How much money do I need? What other factors, do I need to consider before taking this step? Now, I know that you do as well. So now this may sound like a bit of an obvious question to start with, because we've all heard those stats of, the high percentage of traders who fail and, trading can be tough and all that kind of thing. But perhaps you can give us a a bit of a tangible explanation or example on how tough is it to make a living through trading?
Look, I think it's incredibly tough. I spent a number of years down on the trading floor of the Sydney Futures Exchange, and to this day, that's a pretty tight-knit little community. Even though the exchange has been gone 16 years, a lot of us are still pretty close and are continuing contact. A lot of those guys started trading for themselves, either down there or on the trading floor, and were very, very successful. Some of those guys, one comes to mind, for example, he was making $800,000, $900,000 a year, which, when you're 24, 25 was pretty fantastic. But once the trading floor closed, they realized that a significant amount of their success was based on an edge they had from being on the trading floor. And once that was gone, once that edge was gone, well, their success went downhill quite dramatically. You see the same thing with institutional traders. So, at the banks, you've got swap traders, bond traders, FX traders, whatever they may be. And a lot of these guys, as technology has come in, have been retrenched, and their immediate reaction is, oh, well, I'll just go and punt futures for a living. And they don't realize that they were successful in their trading from the institutional flow that was coming through their desk or through their book. And once that was gone, there actually wasn't too much left for them to make money. So, look, I think it is incredibly difficult. I strongly suggest that the very large proportion of guys that I know that were deemed successful at trading, a lot of them aren't doing it anymore. The very vast majority of traders that I've come across from that era actually ran secondary businesses, and I think you'd be surprised how many what appear to be full-time traders actually do run successful businesses. And if you think about it, I guess, on your podcast, you've got interviewing people. I mean, let's just look at someone, for example, one of my favorite interviews you've ever done was Jerry Parker. Now, a lot of people probably say, yeah, well, he's a very successful full-time trader. Well, he's actually not a full-time trader as such. He's a funds manager. He's making a significant amount of his money from managing funds. He's actually running a secondary business. A lot of these guys are. And that's the same thing that I've experienced as well from a lot of these guys from the trading floor and from the bond desks and whatever. They actually run secondary kind of businesses. Some of those have got nothing to do with the markets. One guy I know, for example, ran a very successful eBay store as a side business. And I think that's a good thing. It's, I sent you my little ebook earlier on because it's a question I get all the time as well. Yeah. And that's about earning a second income. And I'm a firm believer in maybe trading for a living is not what it's cracked up to be in a number of areas. And I'm happy to answer that and go into a little bit more depth about that, as we go through. Yeah. But to answer that question, when should I do it? When should I make the change? Well, I think there's two answers to that. I think there's the simple answer that everyone's looking for. And, and I don't think it's that black and white, but that simple answer would probably be, you want to be making 3 times your income and you want to be doing that for at least 3 years before you decide to take the plunge and go full-time trading. I think that's the simple answer. But I think it's a lot more complex than that. If you're a 22-year-old and you still live with your parents and you have no overheads, well, it's probably a lot easier than if you're 35, you've been in a career for, 15 years already and, maybe you have a family or something like that. I think it's a very, very different question. And it's certainly the kind of question that I get all the time as it is for you. But the more complex answer, I think you need to carefully consider everything involved. I've explained before this Lake Wobbegong effect, essentially, which means we tend to overestimate our own capabilities and we underestimate what can go wrong. And, I think there's a lot of situational irony with wanting to trade for a living. I think people have it in their heads that, you push the button in the morning, you go to the beach all day, and that's kind of done. Or you sit with your laptop on the beach punting the FX markets. Well, you just can't see your screen. I know that for a fact. You can't sit in the sunshine and actually see your screen. And at the end of the day, it's not like that. I think the situational irony that comes to mind immediately for me is people wanting to either work less or be their own boss or get out of the 9-to-5 grind or whatever it may be. And look, that's a tangible goal, but it rarely works out like that. A significant amount of people that I come across that have made a go of this, at least for any extended period of time, they sit in front of a screen full time. I know a lot of guys that work at the prop shops around town, and they don't sit on the beach. They sit in front of a screen, usually in an office, for the whole day. And it's no different to being a bank teller at the end of the day, really. You still got a 9-to-5 job. And unfortunately for a lot of these guys, especially in our time zone, where there's not a huge amount of volatility, they need the volatility to make the money. So they may then have to sit on into the European session as well, or into the US session, and that comes in at midnight. So it's not really a 9-to-5 job as such, especially if there's no volatility going on. There used to be a whole pot of traders that moved over to Europe simply for that reason. They were not getting enough volatility in the Australian time zone. Trading into Europe time zone from Australia was too difficult, and they all actually moved over there to Europe to make a go of it. So I think the situational irony is that a lot of the time you're not actually going to be working less. You actually may be working a lot harder. Don't get me wrong, my systems that I have now are systematic, and it literally is pushing the button. But, it took me 30 years to get to that point. The other situational irony I think that everyone wants is they want to make more money. But again, if you do the sums carefully, and let's assume that you're not a 22-year-old living at home with your parents, and you do have overheads like we all do in life. Let's say you do have a $100,000 account, and for the last 3 years you've made 100% return. Well, that's $100,000 each year. Now, you take your living expenses out of that, take your tax out of that. There's not a huge amount left over. You're certainly not putting any funds back into your account to grow from compounding. And I think that is the key downfall of a lot of people. You're only really going to get ahead longer term by allowing the compounding to work. And if you're taking tax out each year and you're taking living expenses out each year, it's very, very, very difficult to actually get that compounding up to a point where it makes a big difference. Obviously, if you have a significant amount of money, that's a slightly different equation. But for the very vast majority of people, that's just not the way it's going to be.
Yeah, I think that kind of comes back to your initial statement there about having another source of income as well that's outside of trading. Because, I remember many years ago when I started my trading journey, all I wanted to do was to quit my corporate job, and I lived and breathed trading. I was obsessed, and my life kind of suffered for it because I so desperately wanted to live like this high-flying life of a trader, or so I thought would be. But I kind of realized that having that job there was actually an advantage, because with these sources of additional income, it actually worked out that by removing that intense focus on having to make money on trading and instead focusing more on the process, my trading performance actually got better.
Yeah.
Not to mention that my life improved because I, got time back and saw my friends and all that kind of thing. But it can be tough to balance life with trading, especially if you have other commitments like a job or a family, etc. So what are some of the alternatives there to trying to manage all of that together?
Well, certainly you're right. Absolutely right. You need to have some kind of a strategy that fits in with your lifestyle, okay? If you work a job, let's say 7 a.m. till 7 p.m., which essentially the corporate world today is like that. You've got 3 kids when you get home. They want some attention from you. You really can't be scalping or day trading the DAX or the FTSE in the European session, and if you try and trade the E-minis in the US session, you're going to be an absolute nervous wreck 2 weeks into it, because you're not going to get enough sleep to sustain you for your day job, etc. So you need to be realistic with what your lifestyle is actually giving you. And that's one of the things we teach in our Trading System Mentor course, is you've got to build a strategy that not only suits your lifestyle, but also your personality. I can't think of anything worse than sitting there and watching numbers roll over on the screen. I spent 5 years on the trading floor of the Sydney Futures Exchange, and believe me, it was the most exciting time of my life. It was adrenaline pumping periods of time. Then for the other 99%, you stood there drumming your thumbs thinking, God, I'm bored senseless, doing the crosswords and that kind of stuff. So I think you need something that suits your personality, and there's certainly ways around doing that. As I said before, systematic is a way to go. Literally, my systems, I open my computer, put my account balance in, literally push the button, it generates the orders, sends it to the broker, and manages the exposure whilst I sleep at night. It's that simple. That said, as I said, it took 30 years to get to that point, but it can be done. But obviously, even with that, there's still a lot of research going on in the background, but that's the kind of thing you can do with a full-time job. But if we just go back to this second income theory, I think that's the smart way to go. Just for what you said, it takes a lot of the pressure off. And I think once people start relying on their trading income, it places a huge amount of pressure on you. Some of these guys that I know that have unfortunately been unable to get on with their trading lives, they've had to revert to different things now. Literally, they can't be employed in any professional business. They've got to drive Uber. They've got to pump petrol at the local BP service station or whatever it is. And it's not a position you want to be in when you're 50, or anything like that. So I think you've just got to use a little bit of common sense. And the one thing I like to get across to people who have this in mind is that why not look at trading as a way to supplement a superior lifestyle? Keep your day job, and then use your trading to pay your mortgage off early. I paid our mortgage off early 40s, mid 40s. And for the average person in Australia, that's not really the dumb thing. That was something I was able to achieve. Traveling with my family each year. We take a 5 or 6 week international holiday with the whole family each year. Buying a new car, putting in a new kitchen, whatever it may be. It's not earning an income, but it's significantly increasing your lifestyle, if you like, without the pressure associated with it. And if it doesn't work out for you, well, you're not going to lose there's not too much downside, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and also the way I kind of look at it is that so I trade a basket of diversified strategies across different markets and different styles, and I think that my income is a similar kind of thing. So having money coming in from different places, sometimes it's not so much in one area, but another area picks it up, and so it really, not only does it just have a good emotional impact in that you're less stressed and you've got less to worry about, but it really kind of brings it all together quite nicely. So that's kind of how I look at trading myself.
Yeah, and look, again, the kinds of strategies you will choose to trade, some can be very, very lumpy. And again, we only have to cite the evidence, the huge body of evidence with trend following traders around the world, and some of them are extremely wealthy, but it's lumpy returns that they're generating. They can go for a year or a year and a half and have negative returns. You can be like a Dunn and have a 60% drawdown. Now, if you're trying to earn a living, you're not going to move too far ahead when that kind of happens. I think it's important for someone very new to this, thinking about this, that they've got to remove any luck. We saw this, I guess, between 2003 and 2007. It was like shooting fish in a barrel. You really couldn't miss, you couldn't miss. And that's all good and well when it's happening. But, you need to ascertain whether that's your skill or it's just luck. For the very vast majority of people, it was just luck, because when the GFC hit, they lost all their money and then they realized, gee, I actually aren't as skilled as what I thought I was. It was just the market making all that money. So if you've had a couple of fantastic years and you've made a lot of money, two things you should ask yourself, and I'm not necessarily saying this is appropriate for everybody, but the common thing would be to ask two questions. Have I just been lucky, yes or no? Or the other very important question is, have I just been using way, way too much risk? Because if you have made a significant amount of money and it is because you've simply used a lot of risk, then you also have to use common sense and think that that could go the other way very, very badly. We hear these people, and you hear it with some of these trading competitions that are out there. I know you've interviewed a few on your website, on your podcast, I think a couple of times, and no disrespect, but they're not going in with their whole net worth taking those kinds of risks. They'll go in with $10,000 and trade it like a madman, and for every 1,000 people that do that, you're going to have one that makes an absolute bomb and win the competition. But for the other 990 that are involved in it, they tend to go out the back door very quickly. And that's not a sustainable thing for trading for a living, And I think slowly and surely is what wins the race over the longer term. So when you're starting out, ask the question, have I just been lucky, or have I been maybe a little bit untoward and used too much risk, and that will come back and bite you in the butt eventually.
Yep. Now, I just wanted to ask about the traders who have perhaps they've considered all these factors. They have a sizable trading account, realistic expectations, and are set to make the transition into trading for a living. Do you have any words of wisdom for them?
Look, I think I come from a systematic background, which I think, honestly, one can rely on that a lot more because it tends to be a lot more definable, a lot more mathematical. And if that's the way, you roll, then trading multiple systems, that's why I trade 5 different systems. I'm realistic and understand that certain systems are going to be out of sync with the market at certain periods of time. So by trading 5 different systems, it allows me to diversify across systems and smooth the equity curve. So I would say that if you were looking down that track, maybe incorporate different styles, different systems if you can. If you're a discretionary trader, it's a little bit more difficult because you are making those decisions on the run. My advice would be try and not limit yourself to one simple asset, one futures contract, which is the usual, right? You get a lot of people out there, they'll just trade the E-mini S&P. A very good example in Australia, a lot of traders really struggled to make money when all the bots came into the share price index futures. When that started happening, it was very, very difficult to make money. Another example, a lot of traders I know used to make a lot of money on the futures roll in the interest rates. So the 5 to 10-year bond roll or the 3-year bond roll, they were able to throw significant levels of volume and for very small spreads. But again, as the institutions have now got all their terminals in front of them rather than going through a broker, it just makes it that much more competitive and significantly that much more difficult. A lot of guys used to make a lot of money doing that 10 years ago. They're not able to do that now because technology has changed, that their edge is now gone. So if you're trading discretionary, don't stick to one instrument because a personality of an instrument will change over time. So you've got to make sure that, dare I use the term for discretionary trading, but survivorship bias actually doesn't come into play. Because if the instrument you're trading does become significantly more difficult to trade, well, you're going to have to go and find something else to trade or live with the consequences.
Yeah.
So I guess discretionary traders try and trade more instruments. Systematic, try and trade more systems. And obviously with those systems, make sure they're robust and not curve fitted or data mined or anything like that. Yeah.
And what about the managing of the good times versus the bad times?
I certainly think you've got to put money aside. I've seen that before. I've seen guys that have had absolutely phenomenal runs, made a lot of money, and done just as well to spend it all. And I think if you're realistic, you either need to compound your account by putting money back into the account, or you've got to put money aside for those difficult periods of time when they do come, and they will come. They come for everybody,
Yeah.
They come from Warren Buffett all the way down. They come for the likes of Jerry Parker. They come for the likes of Bill Dunn. Everyone has it, right? Everyone has those difficult periods of time. So I think you've got to be realistic, put some money aside. And even when we talk to some of the guys at the prop shops, as example, these guys are encouraged to be able to have a second job because they only get paid a cut of what they make. And if they go for a period of time of not making any money, well, the prop shop isn't going to pay them, so they've got to go and get some secondary kind of job. So I think you've just got to be realistic. You've got to have some money in reserve to cover your living expenses and to get through those difficult periods of time.
Yeah. Now, before we start wrapping up for today, I just wanted to, before we hit record on this conversation, we're having a bit of a chat, and you mentioned to me something about this. We've all heard the stats about 90% or 95% or whatever it is of traders fail, and I kind of myself just took it at face value. It sounds like it's correct, but never really understood where it came from. And you actually told me where it came from. So I thought other people might want to know about that as well, because I thought it was quite interesting. So can you share that stat, Nick?
Sure. Well, I guess there's the urban myth that goes around that 90% or 95% of people lose at trading. But it does actually go back to some hard data that was found back in the early 80s. There was an FCM back there, a futures commission merchant called Refco, whom I believe went under in about 2001 on the back of Niederhofer or something like that. But back in the early 80s, Refco was one of the biggest futures brokers in the US, and it instituted a study of its clients to see how many of them made money and all those kinds of things with their clients. And the research showed that something like 90% of its clients lost money. And the reason why they lost money, I think, is what's very important, because it's the same reason today why so many people fail at trading. And back then, the average account size was very, very small, about $5,000, and commissions were about $100 to $150 per contract.
Wow.
So what you had was a situation of commission drag destroying the account, and that is still a prominent problem with a lot of traders today. I constantly get emails from people saying, I've got $1,000, what can I trade? And it's like, well, really nothing, because you might get lucky. I mean, we know people have bought a lottery ticket and won the lottery. Don't get me wrong, you might get lucky, but nobody starts a proper business with $1,000. If you're going to go and buy a franchise, a serious franchise, you're not going to be buying one for $1,000. Or if you are, it's going to be garbage. When you buy a serious franchise, it's going to cost you some serious money. And there's a reason for that. And the same is true for trading. One of the biggest hurdles people need to understand and overcome is commission drag. It's a fact of life. And you've got to reduce that drag as much as possible. It's something that you can actually control. And, if broker A charges you $30 to do a trade and broker B charges you $10, why in the world would you trade with broker A? It doesn't make sense. You can control that drag on your account. I had a gentleman in the office a couple of years ago. He was the father of a friend of mine. He wanted to buy this off-the-shelf trading strategy that was being marketed by this mob down in Victoria. And we calculated that he needed to make 22% per annum just to break even. Wow. And that was impossible. This guy's never traded before. And it came down to this strategy doing 300 round turns, using a CFD broker at $10 per trade. So that's $6,000 worth of commission right there, plus your funding on top of that, the cost of actually subscribing to the service, the interest costs, et cetera, and the service recommended a $50,000 account. So I said, if you go in with $50,000, which is all he had, follow every single trading rule, then you're going to struggle to make money. And that's the bottom line. So it is something that you can control to some degree. Obviously, if you've got a $5,000 account and you want to trade a day trading system, well, you're going to be paying the broker a lot of commission. And in many circumstances, the broker is going to come out of it a lot better than what you are. So I think it's, a lot of people don't give it too much of a thought, but there is some fact behind this. My understanding is the average CFD account in Australia, as an example, is $5,000 or $6,000. And you've got to beg the question, what kind of a business are you running with starting capital of that amount of money? Serious people starting serious businesses, even a trading business, start with serious amounts of money. And yes, I understand that's a hurdle to getting started, but you've got to you've got to make the stars align. You've got to make it as easy as possible. Trading is difficult at the best of times, but when you have these hurdles working against you right from the get-go, well, of course you're not going to succeed at it. So it's best to, if you've only got a small amount of capital, it's best to save some more money, or do a different kind of strategy that doesn't rely on a lot of commissions going in and out of the account. Find a cheap broker. There are cheap brokers out there. Find them, open the account, take the time to look them up and investigate and do that kind of stuff. We were talking before the call, about you trading the ASX on a short-term basis. I only do a very, very small amount of my total trading on the ASX on a short-term basis because the commission drag is so high. The very vast majority of my short-term trading is in the US, because commissions are so much cheaper. I pay 6 times the amount of commission in Australia as I do in the US, and that adds a big drag. And that's the best you can do,
Yep. All right, thank you very much, Nick, for that. Now I'd just like to start wrapping up. So where can people learn more from you?
Well, I've put, if you've read that ebook, Andrew, I've just put together a little bit of a landing page if people want to have a read of that ebook. Okay. So they can get that, thechartist.com.au/better. So that's Better Systems Trader. So just better. And they can actually just download that ebook. And it just gives my thought. The ebook's Learn to Earn a Second Income. It just gives my thoughts on the whole process. Other people will differ from my thoughts, and that's fine, but it will just discuss the situational irony, give you a little bit of background of how some of these prop trading operations work, and there's a fully disclosed trading system in there, which is very similar to the one I use, and so that's thechartist.com.au/better, BETTER.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you very much for sharing that, Nick. I really do appreciate that. So I'll have a link to that on the show notes page as well, so people can easily find that. Perfect. If they're not in a place where they can write down the URL now. So that's awesome. Thank you, Nick. Now, do you have any final words before we finish up?
Look, no, I don't think so. I think trading is worthy of pursuing. Certainly, it's been fantastic for me over the years, but it's not necessarily something that you want to do for a living. I don't think anyway. I do know people that have made a go of it, but certainly pursue it, but maybe pursue it to improve your overall lifestyle rather than make a living. Aim for those things of getting a nice car or having an international holiday. I know one guy who works for a prop shop down in Melbourne, and he takes 3 months off every year. And that's the kind of thing you want to pursue, to go and do those things that make our lives that much better rather than sitting and just watching numbers roll over on a screen the whole time,
Yep, absolutely. All right, awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Nick. Really do appreciate you sharing that insight with us. So thanks again and wish you all the best.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me, Andrew.
Cheers, Nick.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, well, that's it for this episode. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. Come on over to bettersystemtrader.com. That's where you'll find all the previous episodes, all the transcribes, all the show notes, and all the free weekly trading tips. bettersystemtrader.com.